The sound wasn't a shout. It was the sickening thud of a human skull hitting sun-baked concrete, like a melon dropped from a second-story window. In front of Giovanni's marketplace, that sound made the world stop breathing. The young mother with the stroller froze mid-step. The teenagers filming TikToks went silent. The elderly man with his walker looked away. Officer Jackson, the Hammer Briggs, a 250-pound wall of muscle who wore his badge like brass knuckles, grinned down at the man he'd just slammed face first into the pavement. He'd driven a decorated Navy SEAL into the ground, like a tent stake in front of a dozen witnesses. He thought the olive-green uniform meant nothing. He thought the crowd would scatter like they always did. He thought his reputation would make them look away. He was wrong. 3 seconds later, de Briggs was staring at the November sky from the flat of his back, the wind knocked clean out of his lungs by a woman who moved like violence had a Ph.D. Congresswoman Sloan Whitaker hadn't just intervened, she had erased the Hammer from consciousness. But as the sirens screamed toward the scene and backup units surrounded her, the pavement brawl was ending and the institutional war was only beginning. If this story is already touching your heart, go ahead and subscribe. Join our family of hope, healing, and standing up for those who've been told to be small. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The parking lot outside Giovanni's marketplace on the corner of Fletcher and Maritime always smelled of hot asphalt, exhaust fumes, and the yeasty scent of fresh bread from the bakery inside. On Saturday, October 7th, the afternoon air was particularly oppressive, that suffocating pre-autumn heat that clings to the Midwest like a wet blanket. The lot was full of weekend shoppers, families loading groceries, college kids grabbing energy drinks, elderly couples taking their time. But near the western entrance, the temperature was rising for a different reason. Caleb Wes Whitaker, decorated Navy SEAL and recipient of the Bronze Star with Valor, stood beside his sister's hybrid SUV in his service khakis. He wasn't there as a defendant or a suspect. He was there as a brother, carrying grocery bags for Congresswoman Sloan Whitaker after her long flight back from D.C., keeping a promise to help her stock her refrigerator before her next legislative session. He had no idea that in less than 90 seconds, he would become a hashtag. Officer Jackson Briggs didn't become the Hammer overnight. He earned it one broken rib at a time. His first complaint came 3 weeks after graduating from the academy: excessive force during a routine traffic stop in the Riverside district. The driver, a 19-year-old community college student, required 12 stitches and lost 2 teeth. Internal Affairs labeled it within protocol. The second complaint arrived 4 months later: a dislocated shoulder during a noise ordinance call. Again, within protocol. By year 2, Briggs had accumulated 14 formal complaints, 6 settled lawsuits, and a reputation that preceded him like thunder before lightning. The precinct didn't just tolerate Briggs. They celebrated him. Captain Morris Kane, a 28-year veteran with a pension to protect, saw Briggs as old-school effective. The union rep, Vincent Caruso, called him a warrior in a world gone soft. And Judge Horatio Blackwell, who'd dismissed 7 cases against Briggs in 3 years, considered him a necessary corrective to the coddling of criminals. Together, they formed an unholy trinity: the muscle, the shield, and the gavel. Briggs operated with surgical precision. He knew which neighborhoods had broken streetlights. He knew which corner stores had malfunctioning cameras. He knew that a 2 a.m. stop in the warehouse district left no witnesses except the ones he chose. His patrol car became a mobile courtroom where he served as judge, jury, and executioner of dignity. The department's official position? Officer Briggs has an exemplary record of community engagement. The community's position? Lock your doors when you see Unit 47. 300 miles away in Washington, D.C., Congresswoman Sloan Whitaker was building a different kind of reputation. The media called her the Iron Lady of the Midwest, and not as a compliment. At 38, she'd risen from assistant district attorney to state senator to U.S. Congress in 7 years, fueled by a singular obsession: dismantling qualified immunity and militarized policing. Her opponents called her anti-cop. Her supporters called her the only one with a spine. Sloan didn't just talk about reform, she weaponized data. Her office maintained a database of every officer-involved incident in her district going back 15 years. She knew that Precinct 14 had a use of force rate 340% higher than the national average. She knew that complaints against officers disappeared into bureaucratic black holes with suspicious regularity. And she knew that the city had paid out $4.7 million in settlements over 5 years, while claiming there was no systemic problem. But data wasn't her only weapon. Before politics, Sloan had spent 6 years as a defensive tactics instructor for Naval Special Warfare Command, the same program that trained SEALs. She could break down a threat assessment in milliseconds and execute a takedown with clinical precision. Her colleagues joked that she was the only congresswoman who could actually back up her legislation with a chokehold. They had no idea how literal that would become. What nobody knew, not the press, not her staff, not even her closest allies, was that Sloan had a file on Officer Jackson Briggs that was 3 inches thick. She had been building it for 18 months, waiting for the right moment to introduce her Police Accountability Act with a case study that would make headlines. She never imagined her own brother would become that case study. The call came through Unit 47's radio at 2:47 p.m. Suspicious person loitering. Giovanni's Marketplace. Possible drug activity. Officer Briggs smiled. Saturday afternoon meant crowds. Crowds meant an audience. He pulled into the lot with his lights off. A predator's approach. His eyes locked onto the target immediately. A black man in military dress, mid-30s, standing beside a silver hybrid SUV. Clean cut. Confident posture. The kind of confidence Briggs specialized in breaking. "Afternoon!" Briggs called out, his hand already resting on his service weapon. "Mind telling me what you're doing here?" Caleb Whitaker turned, grocery bags still in hand. "Loading groceries, officer. Is there a problem?" "I'll decide if there's a problem." Briggs moved closer, invading the personal space he knew made people uncomfortable. "You got ID?" "Of course." Caleb set down the bags slowly, reaching for his wallet. "I'm actually—" "Hands where I can see them!" Briggs barked, loud enough to turn heads across the parking lot. Phones came out. The performance had begun. Caleb froze, hands raised to shoulder height. His military training kicked in. De-escalation, compliance, survival. "Sir, I'm just reaching for my identification. I'm Navy. I don't care if you're the King of England. On the ground, now." "Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm a decorated—" The first shove came without warning. Briggs's palm struck Caleb's chest, sending him stumbling backward into the SUV. The bag of groceries hit the pavement. Oranges rolled across the asphalt like small, helpless witnesses. "I said on the ground!" Briggs roared, grabbing Caleb's wrist and twisting it into a compliance hold that made the SEAL's shoulder socket scream. That's when the crowd started to gather. A teenager with his phone out. A mother pulling her daughter closer. An elderly veteran whose hands began to shake as he recognized the uniform. The same olive-green service khakis he'd worn 50 years ago. Caleb went down on one knee, not from pain, but from tactical calculation. Fightin' would justify everything. Compliance might end this. It didn't. Briggs kicked Caleb's supporting leg out from under him. The SEAL went down hard, catching himself on his forearms. Then Briggs's boot pressed between his shoulder blades, grinding his face toward the concrete. "Please," Caleb managed, his cheeks scraping against the sun-heated pavement. "I'm a Navy SEAL. Check my ID. My sister is—" "Your sister can watch you bleed." Briggs grabbed the back of Caleb's head, that perfectly regulation military haircut, and lifted it 6 inches off the ground. For a moment, time suspended. The crowd held its breath. Somewhere, a car alarm went off. A woman whispered, "Oh my God, someone stop him." Then Briggs slammed Caleb's face into the concrete with the full weight of his hatred behind it. The sound, that wet, terrible thud, would haunt everyone who heard it. But not as much as what happened next. Because Sloane Whitaker, still in her congressional blazer from the morning flight, stepped out of Giovanni's marketplace with a bouquet of flowers for her kitchen table, and saw her baby brother's blood pooling on the pavement. Sloane didn't scream. Screaming wasted oxygen. The bouquet hit the pavement, white lilies scattering like shrapnel, as her body shifted into threat assessment mode. Distance to target, 40 feet. Threat level, active lethal force. Witnesses, 14, phones recording. Objective, neutralize without killing. 6 years of teaching SEALs how to disarm attackers compressed into 3 seconds of movement. Briggs never saw her coming. One moment he was grinding Caleb's face into concrete, drunk on power and the gasps of the crowd. The next moment, 135 pounds of congressional fury hit him like a guided missile. Sloane's shoulder drove into his kidney, a strike designed to shut down the nervous system without permanent damage. Briggs's grip released involuntarily. He spun. He threw in a wild haymaker that would have decapitated a stationary target. Sloane wasn't stationary. She slipped inside his guard, her hand snapping up to his wrist in a figure-4 lock that hyperextended his elbow. The satisfying pop of cartilage signaled success. "Federal assault on an officer!" Briggs roared, trying to use his size advantage. He outweighed her by 115 pounds. It didn't matter. Sloane pivoted, using his own momentum to throw him off balance. Her foot swept his ankle, a textbook sacrifice throw, and suddenly, the hammer was airborne. He landed flat on his back, his head bouncing off the same concrete he'd used as a weapon seconds earlier. The parking lot erupted. "World star!" She dropped him. "That's a congresswoman!" Sloane knelt beside Caleb, her hand finding his pulse while keeping her eyes locked on Briggs. The blood streamed from her brother's nose, mixing with the tears he refused to shed. "Stay still, Wes. I've got you." Briggs staggered to his feet, reaching for his radio. "Code 33. Officer needs assistance. Female suspect, armed and dangerous." "I'm unarmed, and you know it." Sloane stood slowly, hands visible, positioning herself between Briggs and her brother. The crowd pressed closer, phones capturing every angle. "My name is Congresswoman Sloane Whitaker. This man is my brother, a decorated Navy SEAL who was brutalized while loading groceries. I used necessary force to stop an assault in progress." "You assaulted a police officer." "I stopped a violent felony." Sloane's voice carried across the parking lot, playing to the cameras she knew were live streaming. And every second of it is recorded on at least a dozen devices. The sirens arrived like a mechanical hurricane. 6 units, lights blazing. Officers poured out, hands on weapons, forming a perimeter around Sloane like she was an active shooter. Captain Morris Kane emerged from the lead vehicle, his face the color of spoiled meat. He took in the scene. Briggs bleeding from his scalp. Caleb barely conscious. Sloane standing between them like the statue of justice itself. "Congresswoman Whitaker," Kane said slowly, "you're under arrest for assault on a police officer." "You're making a mistake, Captain." "No, ma'am. You made the mistake when you put hands on one of my officers." The cuffs clicked around Sloane's wrists. tight enough to leave marks, loose enough to avoid another lawsuit. As they led her to the patrol car, she caught the eye of the teenager still recording. "Don't delete that video," she called out. "Upload it everywhere." The kid nodded, fingers already moving across his screen. The citywide media firestorm began 18 minutes later. Natalie Voss got the notification at 3:14 p.m., a Twitter alert that made her coffee go cold. Congresswoman arrested after confrontation with police. By 3:16, she was in her car. By 3:22, she was at Giovanni's marketplace, watching crime scene tape go up around the parking lot like yellow streamers at the world's worst party. Natalie had been covering the police beat for the Metro Tribune for 11 years. She knew the script. Officer-involved incident. Internal investigation. No wrongdoing found. Settlement paid with taxpayer money. Repeat. But this was different. A sitting congresswoman. A Navy SEAL. By 14 civilian witnesses. And most importantly, cameras everywhere. She approached the store manager, a nervous man named Vincent Parcelli, who was wringing his hands like he was trying to start a fire. "Mr. Parcelli, I understand your security cameras would have captured the incident?" "Already talked to the police. They took the hard drive." "Before or after you made a backup?" Parcelli's eyes darted away. "Technical malfunction. System was down all afternoon." Natalie had heard that song before. She'd danced to it a dozen times. Funny how these malfunctions always happen during critical incidents. "Lady, I don't know what you want me to say." The truth would be refreshing. She leaned in, dropping her voice. "How much did they offer you?" Parcelli's silence was answer enough. Across town, in a basement apartment that smelled of energy drinks and thermal paste, Miller Tech Hobbs was doing what he did best, finding things people thought they'd deleted. The 24-year-old IT specialist, fired from the police department 6 months ago for inappropriate curiosity, had kept certain access credentials that his former employers assumed were revoked. They weren't. Tech had a digital key to the city's entire surveillance grid. "Come on, baby," he muttered, fingers flying across 3 keyboards simultaneously. "Show me what they don't want me to see." Giovanni's security system was a NextGuard 4000, standard commercial installation with cloud backup. The police had seized the physical DVR, but the cloud was eternal. Tech bypassed the admin portal and went straight to the raw data stream. The footage was there, to time-stamped 14:47:33. He watched Briggs slam Caleb into the concrete, watched Sloane's intervention, watched the whole beautiful, terrible thing unfold in 1080p clarity. Then he watched the deletion command execute at 15:03:17, 8 minutes after the arrest. But deletion isn't erasure. It's just changing the address. Tech's custom recovery software dug into the unallocated sectors like an archaeologist brushing away sand. Fragment by fragment, the video reconstructed itself. Every frame, every angle, every second of Briggs's brutality preserved in digital amber. "Gotcha," Tech whispered, copying the file to 7 different encrypted drives. His phone rang. Natalie Voss. "Tell me you have something," she said without preamble. "I have everything. But Nat, they're scrubbing this from existence. Giovanni's system, the ATM across the street, even the traffic camera on Fletcher. Someone with serious access is burning evidence." "How high does this go?" "Higher than a patrol captain. This is IT department level. Maybe higher." Natalie was quiet for 3 seconds, her thinking pause. "Can you get me a copy that's court admissible?" "Already done. Metadata intact, chain of custody documented." "But Nat, we need to move fast. They're not just deleting files, they're rewriting history." "Then let's write it back. My way." Parker Reed was 19 years old. worked minimum wage at Giovanni's marketplace, and had never done anything remotely heroic in his life. Until Saturday, October 7th, when his phone became a weapon. He'd been on break when it happened, vaping behind the loading dock, scrolling TikTok, trying to kill the last 30 minutes of his shift. And the commotion brought him around front just in time to see a cop slamming someone's face into the pavement, like he was trying to break through to the Earth's core. Parker's phone was already in his hand. Muscle memory took over. He hit record. The angle was perfect. Unobstructed view over the hood of a parked Camry, close enough to capture audio, far enough to stay invisible. He filmed the whole thing, the brutality, the takedown, the arrest. His hands shook so badly, the footage had a documentary-style rawness that no Hollywood director could replicate. When his manager, Vincent, announced the security system had malfunctioned, Parker knew exactly what that meant. He'd seen enough movies. People who spoke up disappeared into unemployment lines, or worse. So he did what every Gen Z kid does when faced with injustice. He posted it to Twitter with 6 strategic hashtags. The video went live at 4:47 p.m. By 5:15, it had 50,000 views. By 6:30, it was trending nationally. By 8 p.m., it had 2.3 million views, and hashtag Justice for Caleb was the #1 trend worldwide. The footage showed everything the police report tried to hide. An unprovoked assault on a man in military uniform, a brutal face slam that made viewers wince, and a congresswoman executing a textbook defensive intervention while surrounded by witnesses. The audio captured Briggs's threats, Caleb's compliance, and Sloane's calm identification of herself before arrest. It was damning, irrefutable, viral. The Pentagon's Office of Public Affairs received its first inquiry at 8:47 p.m. from CNN. By 9:15, they'd fielded calls from NBC, JABC, CBS, Fox News, Al Jazeera, and the BBC. By 10:30, a 3-star general was on a conference call with the Secretary of Defense, watching Parker's footage on repeat. "That's one of ours," the general said quietly, watching Caleb's blood pool on the concrete. "Bronze Star recipient, 2 tours. Impeccable record." "The officer?" someone asked. 14 complaints, 6 settlements, and apparently untouchable. The general's jaw tightened. "Not anymore. Get me JAG. Get me Civil Rights Division. And someone find out who's running interference for this precinct." The Pentagon doesn't move quickly, except when military honor is at stake. By midnight, federal investigators were en route. By 1 a.m., the FBI's Civil Rights Division had opened a formal inquiry. Parker Reed, meanwhile, was in his childhood bedroom, watching his view count climb past 4 million, while his mom brought him hot chocolate and told him she was proud. "You did good, baby," she said, kissing his forehead. Parker had never felt more terrified or more alive. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Media requests, interview offers, and one particularly chilling message from an unknown number. Delete the video or face consequences. He screenshotted the threat and posted that too. The internet doesn't forgive, and it doesn't forget. This story is for you. Hit that subscribe button right now and comment where you're watching from. We're building a family of people. Detectives Dawson Rawlins and Jennifer Stone arrived at the hospital at 11:47 p.m., badges prominently displayed, carrying a duffel bag that smelled faintly of evidence locker and desperation. Caleb Whitaker lay in room 314 with a concussion, broken nose, fractured cheekbone, and the kind of rage that made his vitals spike every time a nurse checked his blood pressure. An MP stood guard outside. Pentagon orders, but hospital security was local jurisdiction. Rawlins nodded to the MP. "Need to process evidence related to the arrest. Won't take long." The young Marine looked uncertain but stepped aside. Jurisdiction was a gray area at midnight. The detectives entered, closing the door with the gentle click of a trap snapping shut. Mr. Whitaker, Stone began, her voice dripping with false sympathy. We need to have a difficult conversation. Caleb's eyes narrowed. 6 years in naval special warfare had taught him to recognize predators in every uniform. My attorney present? This is off the record. A courtesy. Really? Rollins moved to the window, casually blocking the view from outside. See, we found something troubling during our investigation. Stone unzipped the duffel bag. Inside, 5 kilograms of heroin in vacuum-sealed bricks, each stamped with a scorpion logo. Caleb's heart monitor spiked. You're planting drugs in my hospital room? We're recovering drugs from your vehicle, Stone corrected smoothly. Estimated street value, $400,000. Federal trafficking weight. Mandatory minimum, 25 years. I'm a Navy SEAL. You're a black man with a viral video, Rollins interrupted, his voice dropping to a predatory purr. And juries love a fall from grace. War hero turned drug kingpin? That's a story that sells itself. Caleb tried to sit up, but his concussion made the room tilt. This is insane. Those aren't mine. Doesn't matter whose they are. Matters whose car they're in. Stone pulled out her phone, showing Caleb photos of his SUV's trunk, the drugs perfectly positioned. Already logged into evidence. Chain of custody established. Our word against yours. The Pentagon? The Pentagon isn't here. We are. Rollins leaned in close enough for Caleb to smell the coffee on his breath. But we're reasonable people. We understand this situation got out of hand. Officer Briggs may be overreacted. Your sister may be overreacted. Everyone's stressed. What do you want? Stone smiled, the expression of a shark that's tasted blood. Your sister resigns from Congress, publicly. She admits she assaulted an officer, apologizes, and disappears from public life. Or maybe takes a nice consulting job somewhere quiet. In exchange for what? The drugs disappear. Evidence gets misplaced. You walk out of here with nothing but a good story about police brutality that nobody can prove. Rollins checked his watch. You have 10 minutes to decide. After that, we file federal trafficking charges, and your sister can visit you in Supermax while she fights her own felony conviction. Caleb's jaw clenched hard enough to aggravate his fractured cheekbone. The pain sharpened his focus. You're asking me to destroy my sister's career to save myself from charges you fabricated. We're offering you a way out of a cage. Stone zipped the duffel bag. 10 minutes, Mr. Whitaker. Choose wisely. They left him there, alone with his monitors beeping and his phone confiscated and his freedom balanced on a scale weighted with lies. Caleb closed his eyes and did what SEALs do when the mission goes sideways. He adapted. His sister had taught him something during those defensive tactics courses years ago. She'd said, the moment they threaten you, they've shown you their hand. The moment they offer a deal, they've shown you their weakness. Their weakness was evidence. Evidence they needed to disappear. Which meant somewhere, someone had footage they couldn't erase. Dawson Ghost Zero Williams got the call at 2:34 a.m. from his cousin, who worked hospital security. They're moving the SEAL. Unmarked van. No paperwork. Black site transfer. Ghost Zero didn't ask questions. He'd grown up in Riverside, the same neighborhood where Briggs had broken bones and spirits for 6 years. He knew what black site meant. A holding facility where bodies disappeared into the system like stones into deep water. The 26-year-old drill artist had 847,000 YouTube subscribers who watched him rap about police violence over haunting piano loops. His latest track, Badge and a Bullet, had 3.2 million views. But streaming numbers meant nothing if you couldn't move people from screens to streets. Ghost Zero opened his phone and went live on Instagram. Y'all see that video? Navy SEAL getting his face slammed? His sister getting arrested for stopping it? His voice was calm, controlled, the eye of a hurricane. Now they trying to move him. Middle of the night, no lawyers, no witnesses. They gon' make him disappear and plant whatever they want. The viewer count climbed. 1,000, 5,000, 15,000. I'm heading to Mercy General right now. Fletcher and Maritime. If you about that life, if you tired of watching our people get erased, pull up. Bring your phones, bring your voices. We gon' make a human wall they can't cross. He ended the stream and sent a group text to every community organizer, activist, and concerned citizen in his contacts. Mercy General. Now. They're moving Caleb Whitaker. The unmarked van arrived at 3:47 a.m., expecting darkness and silence. Instead, it found 200 people forming a blockade across the hospital's rear exit. They stood shoulder to shoulder. Teenagers in hoodies, mothers with strollers, elderly church ladies with folding chairs, college students with protest signs hastily scrawled on cardboard. Ghost Zero stood at the center, phone held high, streaming everything. "That's the van!" someone shouted. "No plates! No markings!" The driver, Detective Rawlins, stepped out, face twisted with rage. "This is official police business. Disperse immediately or face arrest for obstruction." Ghost Zero stepped forward, his voice carrying across the crowd and into 47,000 live viewers. "Show us the transfer paperwork. Show us the court order. Show us anything that says you got legal authority to move a man in the middle of the night." Rawlins's hand moved to his service weapon. The crowd didn't flinch. "You gon' shoot 200 people on camera?" Ghost Zero's voice was steady, fearless. "Go ahead. World's watching. Pentagon's watching. FBI's watching. Make your move." The standoff lasted 4 minutes that felt like hours. Phones captured every angle. News helicopters circled overhead, alerted by the social media frenzy. Rawlins's radio crackled, Captain Kane ordering him to abort. "This isn't over," Rawlins snarled, climbing back into the van. "Yeah, it is," Ghost Zero called after him. "You just don't know it yet." The crowd erupted in cheers as the van retreated. But Ghost Zero knew this was just the opening move. He turned to his camera, to his 89,000 viewers. "They tried to move him in darkness. We brought the light. Now we stay here. We form shifts. We guard this brother round the clock until the feds arrive or the truth comes out. Who's with me?" The response was unanimous. "We are." By dawn, the blockade had grown to 500 people. By noon, it was 1,000. Tents went up. Food trucks arrived. Local churches brought coffee and blankets. What started as a drill artist's Instagram live became a community occupation. And inside room 314, Caleb Whitaker watched through his window as strangers became an army, protecting a man they'd never met because his story was their story. Because enough was enough. The courtroom smelled of furniture polish and broken promises. Judge Horatio Blackwell presided over the preliminary hearing like a king in his counting house, already calculating how to dismiss the charges against Officer Briggs, while burying Congresswoman Whitaker under a mountain of felony counts. Sloan sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit that made her look like every defendant Blackwell had railroaded before. Caleb, still bandaged, I sat in the gallery surrounded by Pentagon attorneys who'd flown in overnight. The media packed the overflow room, every major network, every digital outlet, every journalist who smelled blood in the water. Briggs sat at the prosecution table looking smug, his attorney whispering reassurances about qualified immunity and reasonable force. Then the courtroom doors opened. Lucille Briggs entered like a ghost, returning to the scene of her haunting. She was 68 years old, wore a church dress she'd owned for 30 years, and carried a leather-bound notebook that had lived in her closet for 6. "Your Honor," she said, her voice shaking but clear, "I have evidence relevant to these proceedings." Blackwell's face went pale. "Ma'am, this is a closed—" "I'm Lucille Briggs. That's my son." She pointed at Jackson, whose expression shifted from smugness to horror. "And I'm here to tell the truth about what he's done." The courtroom erupted. Bailiffs moved to intercept her. But Sloane's lead attorney, a bulldog named Patricia Chen from the ACLU, was faster. "Your Honor, we move to admit Mrs. Briggs as a witness for the defense." Blackwell stammered, looking to the prosecution for help. But even they were too stunned to object. "Mrs. Briggs, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Lucille walked to the witness stand, Bible in one hand, notebook in the other. She was sworn in, her hand trembling on the good book. Patricia Chen approached gently. "Mrs. Briggs, what is that notebook?" "It's my son's ledger." Lucille opened it, revealing pages filled with neat handwriting, dates, names, amounts. "Started keeping it after the 3rd lawsuit. Every time someone called our house crying, every time the department paid money to make something go away, every time Jackson came home with someone else's blood on his knuckles, I wrote it down." She began to read. March 14th, 2019. Dawson Johnson, $15,000 settlement, broken jaw. May 3rd, 2019. Detective Stone delivered $2,000 cash to our house. Jackson's cut for testimony in the Rivera case. August 17th, 2020. Captain Kane called, said the Henderson complaint was handled. September. The list went on. 14 pages. 6 years. 47 incidents. Briggs shot to his feet. "She's lying. She's senile. Sit down, Jackson," Lucille said quietly, and her son, the Hammer, the terror of Riverside, the untouchable badge, collapsed back into his chair like a child caught stealing. "Why now?" Patricia Chen asked gently. "Why come forward today?" Lucille's eyes filled with tears. "Because I watched that video. That young man in his uniform, just buying groceries for his sister. And I saw my son slam his face into concrete, like he was nothing, like he was garbage." She looked at Caleb. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have stopped him years ago." She turned to Judge Blackwell. "You dismissed 7 cases against my son. I got notes on 5 of them. The phone calls from Captain Kane, the golf outings, the campaign contributions. You're in here too, Your Honor." The courtroom exploded. Blackwell's gavel pounded uselessly. Reporters sprinted for the doors. Pentagon attorneys were already on their phones. And in the back row, a federal prosecutor smiled grimly, knowing that qualified immunity just became worthless. Lucille Briggs had done what the entire justice system couldn't. She'd broken the blue wall with a mother's grief and an accountant's precision. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict took 47 minutes. Judge Regina Martinez, appointed after Blackwell's emergency recusal and subsequent FBI investigation, read the counts in a voice that carried the weight of justice too long delayed. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice, guilty. On the charge of evidence tampering, guilty. The list went on. 12 counts. 12 guilty verdicts. Briggs stood motionless, his lawyer's hand on his shoulder more for support than strategy. In the gallery, Lucille Briggs wept quietly, while Caleb Whitaker, fully healed now, back in his dress uniform, sat with military rigidity. Sloane, all charges dismissed weeks earlier, sat beside her brother. Her Police Accountability Act had passed the House on a bipartisan vote 3 days ago. Sometimes justice moved slow. Sometimes it moved like lightning. Judge Martinez removed her glasses. "Mr. Briggs, you were given a badge and asked to protect. Instead, you brutalized. You were given authority, and you weaponized it. You created a reign of terror that lasted 6 years and destroyed lives without consequence. She paused, letting the silence build. This court sentences you to 63 years in federal prison, to be served in general population without possibility of parole for 30 years. The courtroom gasped. 63 years was a death sentence for a 34-year-old man. But more importantly, general population meant no protective custody, no separation from the inmates whose lives he'd ruined. Briggs's knees buckled. His attorney caught him. "Your Honor, we request protective." Request denied. The defendant showed no mercy. This court sees no reason to show him special consideration. As marshals moved to take Briggs into custody, a voice called from the gallery, "See you soon, Hammer." It was Dawson Johnson, broken jaw from 2019, 14 screws in his face, and a cellmate assignment in Unit 7 of FCY Coleman. The same unit where Raymond Big Country Lurch served as the unofficial mayor. The prison bus deposited Briggs at Coleman on a Tuesday morning. He shuffled through intake in shackles, processed like every other convict, stripped of everything except his name and number. But when the cell door opened to Unit 7, Block C, he saw him. Big Country Lurch, 6 feet 8 inches, 310 pounds of muscle and retribution. Serving 25 to life for a drug charge that Briggs had testified in. Testimony that Lucille's ledger proved was purchased for $3,000. "Well, well," Lurch said, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. "The Hammer finally came home." The other inmates, 12 men, each with their own Briggs story, formed a semicircle. No weapons, no violence, just the promise of 30 years in a 12-by-8 cell, with men who remembered every broken bone, every planted drug, every stolen year. "We got time," Lurch said, smiling without warmth. "Whole lot of time. And you know what? We gon' use every second of it to teach you about justice." The cell door slammed shut with the finality of a coffin lid. Outside the prison, Sloan Whitaker stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., signing the Police Accountability Act into law, while Caleb stood behind her in his dress blues, every medal polished to mirror shine. "This is for every person who said their truth and wasn't believed," Sloan said to the cameras, "for every family destroyed by unchecked power, for every mother like Lucille Briggs who found the courage to choose justice over blood." In Coleman, Briggs lay on a concrete bunk, staring at a ceiling he'd see for the next 3 decades. The hammer had finally been broken, and justice, for once, had the last word.